Moscow Palace, March night in 1584. A Tsar who once drenched Russia in rivers of blood let out his final ragged gasp, a sound that carried the stench of poison and betrayal, echoing through the icy halls. His body, swollen to over 200 pounds, collapsed onto a chessboard mid-game. His bloodshot eyes frozen wide in terror, his mouth leaking a dark, putrid fluid that reeked of death itself, as whispers of murder slithered through the shadows. This was the bloody end of Ivan the Terrible, a ruler whose name alone sent shivers down the spines of millions, but whose death was so gruesome, so shrouded in mystery, that it left his empire trembling in its wake. For those of you joining us on Sleepy History tonight, prepare to uncover a tale of horror that history has tried to bury beneath the frozen winds of Russia, a tale of a mad Tsar whose cruelty knew no bounds, and whose final moments were as chilling as the bloodbath he unleashed. Ivan IV, better known as Ivan the Terrible, was a man who ruled with a fist of iron and a heart of ice. Crowned at just 16, he started as a visionary, uniting Russia and forging an empire that stretched across snowy plains. But his mind twisted over the years, consumed by paranoia, rage, and a thirst for violence that turned his court into a slaughterhouse. He butchered his own son in a fit of fury, ordered massacres that left entire towns soaked in blood, and unleashed a reign of terror that made even his closest allies quake in their boots. So how did a Tsar, who once held absolute power, meet such a grotesque end? From the chilling suspicion of poison seeping through his veins to the horrifying decay of his body as it lay abandoned in the palace. This is the true story of Ivan the Terrible's bloody demise, a tale so repugnant, it's rarely told in all its gory detail. Tonight, we'll reveal the Tsar's descent into a living nightmare, where his paranoia turned against him, his empire whispered of betrayal, and his death became a mystery that still haunts the pages of history. This is Sleepy History, where we dig into history's darkest corners, uncovering the gruesome punishments, bloody executions, and painful truths that shaped the past. If you're fascinated by death, power, and the raw cruelty of history, you're in the right place. So, dim the lights, pull that blanket closer, and dare to step into the frozen halls of Moscow, if you can stomach the horror. Let's begin, with a whisper that'll chill your blood and maybe haunt your dreams. Let's step back to the icy dawn of 16th century Russia, a land of endless snow and whispered fears, where a young prince named Ivan IV stood poised to carve his name into history with a blade of ambition and a thirst for blood. Born in 1530, under a sky as cold as the Kremlin's stone walls, Ivan was just 3 years old when his father, Grand Prince Vasily III, died, leaving him an orphan in a court crawling with vipers. The boyars Russia's powerful nobles saw the child as a puppet to be controlled, their greedy hands pulling the strings, while his mother, Elena Glinskaya, fought to protect him until she, too, was poisoned in 1538, her body cold before Ivan even turned 8. For those of you nestled under your blankets tonight, imagine a boy barely 5 feet tall, weighing less than 80 pounds, standing alone in a world that wanted him broken. But Ivan wasn't broken. He was forged in that crucible of betrayal, his heart hardening with every whispered plot he overheard in the shadowy halls. By 1547, at the tender age of 16, Ivan was crowned as the first Tsar of all Russia, a title that echoed the grandeur of Caesar himself. standing over 6 feet tall by then, with long black hair and eyes that burned with a quiet intensity. Ivan was a sight to behold, a young ruler whose presence commanded awe. He was no mere prince anymore. He was a sovereign with a vision to drag Russia into a new era, a unified empire that could rival the might of Rome in those early years. Ivan seemed like a beacon of hope for a fractured land. He introduced sweeping reforms, creating a new legal code, the Sudebnik, that brought order to the chaos of feudal laws. He expanded Russia's borders, conquering the Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, stretching his dominion across vast snowy plains. He built St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow, its colorful domes a testament to his glory, a monument that still stands as a jewel in Russia's crown. It's almost hard to believe. Isn't it a ruler so young, so full of promise, shaping a nation with the kind of brilliance that could have made him a legend, if only his mind hadn't begun to twist? Ivan's early reign wasn't just about conquest. It was personal, too. In 1547, the same year he was crowned, he married Anastasia Romanovna, a woman whose gentle beauty seemed to soften the storm brewing inside him. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely 110 pounds, Anastasia was a delicate figure in a brutal world, her calm presence a rare light in Ivan's darkening life. Together, they had 6 children, and for a time, Ivan seemed stable. He doted on his family, his court buzzing with the kind of hope that Russia hadn't felt in decades. He surrounded himself with advisors he trusted, men like Alexei Adashev and the priest Sylvester, who guided him with wisdom, while the Tsar dreamed of an empire that would outlast the ages. Standing at the Kremlin's gates, Ivan would have looked every inch the ruler Russia needed, a towering figure in furs, his voice booming with commands, his gaze sharp enough to cut through steel. But beneath the surface, something sinister was stirring. Even in those golden years, Ivan's temper flared like a wildfire. As a child, he'd tortured animals, hurling dogs from the Kremlin's towers, watching their broken bodies hit the ground with a sickening thud, a twisted grin on his lips. Now, as Tsar, he turned that cruelty on his enemies, real or imagined. He'd summon boyars to his court, their faces pale with dread, and lash out at the slightest hint of disloyalty, his voice a growl that sent shivers down their spines. It's chilling, isn't it? A ruler who built cathedrals with one hand, while the other was already stained with blood, itching for more, and that bloodlust would soon consume him. As the whispers of betrayal and the ghosts of his past began to claw at his mind, Ivan's reign of terror was just beginning, and the horrors that awaited would make even the bravest souls recoil in fear. Let's take a deep breath and step into the next chapter of this gruesome tale, where the Tsar's madness spills over and Russia drowns in blood. Now let's step into the heart of Ivan the Terrible's reign, where the icy winds of Russia carried the screams of the innocent, and the snow turned red with the blood of those who dared to cross him. By 1560, the Tsar, who once dreamed of a unified empire, had morphed into a monster. His mind a twisted maze of paranoia and rage, his hands stained with the blood of thousands. For those of you cozying up with sleepy history tonight, picture a 6-foot-tall ruler, his long black hair now streaked with gray, his once sharp eyes clouded with madness, pacing the Kremlin like a caged beast, ready to lash out at any one friend, foe, or even family. This was Ivan the Terrible, at his most unhinged, a Tsar whose cruelty would carve a scar into Russia's history that still bleeds today. The turning point came in 1560, when Ivan's beloved wife, Anastasia Romanovna, died under shadowy circumstances, at just 5 feet 2 inches and barely 110 pounds. Anastasia had been the one light in Ivan's dark world, her gentle touch the only thing that seemed to tame his storms. But when she passed, some say from illness. Others whisper poison at the hands of scheming nobles. Ivan's fragile grip on sanity snapped like a brittle twig. He was convinced the Boyars had murdered her, their whispered plots echoing in his fractured mind. From that moment on, Ivan saw enemies everywhere, and his paranoia unleashed a reign of terror that would make even the toughest folks today shudder. It's a chilling thought. Isn't it a Tsar who loved so deeply, now driven to madness by the very loss that should have humbled him? In 1565, Ivan unleashed his most terrifying creation, the Oprichnina, a shadowy force of loyal killers dressed in black, riding black horses with symbols of a dog's head and a broom meant to sniff out treason and sweep it away. These Oprichniki were Ivan's personal death squad, given free rein to hunt down anyone he suspected of betrayal. And hunt they did. In 1570, Ivan turned his wrath on the city of Novgorod, a thriving trade hub he believed was plotting against him. What followed was a massacre that turned the Volkhov River red with blood. Over 60,000 people, men, women, even children were butchered in a spree of violence that lasted weeks. Ivan's men tied families to sleds, dragged them to the frozen river, and tossed them through the ice, their screams swallowed by the frigid water as they drowned. Others were strung up, their bodies dangling like grim ornaments, while Ivan watched from his horse, a twisted smile on his lips. The stench of death hung so thick in the air. Folks said you could smell it from miles away. It's a nightmare straight out of a horror flick. Right, a Tsar who turned a city into a graveyard, all because of whispers in his head. But Ivan's madness didn't stop with strangers. He turned it on his own flesh and blood. In 1581, in a fit of rage, Ivan did the unthinkable. He killed his own son, Ivan Ivanovich, the heir to his throne. Picture this: a heated argument in the Kremlin, Ivan's temper flaring like a wildfire, his son standing at 5 feet 10 inches, a young man of 27 pleading for reason. But Ivan, blind with fury, grabbed a heavy staff and struck his son across the head. Blood poured from the wound, staining the stone floor, as Ivan Ivanovich crumpled, his eyes wide with shock, his last breath a gasp of betrayal. Ivan fell to his knees, cradling his son's lifeless body, his howls of regret echoing through the palace. It's a sick kind of irony. Isn't it a Tsar who built an empire to last generations, destroying his own legacy with a single, brutal blow? By now, Ivan's body was failing as fast as his mind. At over 200 pounds, his frame was a wreck, his hair falling out in clumps, his skin peeling like old paint, his joints aching from what some historians suspect was mercury poisoning from the quack remedies he took for his pain. He shuffled through the Kremlin, a shadow of the towering ruler he'd once been, his paranoia whispering that every courtier was out to get him. And maybe they were. Ivan's reign of terror had turned allies into enemies, and as his health crumbled, so did his grip on power. The stage was set for a gruesome end, one that would leave Russia reeling, and a mystery that still lingers in the frost. Let's take a deep breath and step into the final. bloody chapter of Ivan's nightmare, where betrayal and death wait in the shadows. Now let's descend into the final, gruesome chapter of Ivan the Terrible's life, a chapter so horrifying, so steeped in mystery, that it stripped away every shred of the Tsar's once mighty image. By March 1584, Ivan IV was a walking corpse, his 6-foot frame a bloated wreck at over 200 pounds, his skin peeling like old parchment, his hair falling out in clumps, and his joints screaming with every step. The Kremlin, once a fortress of his power, had become a tomb of whispers, where courtiers tiptoed around their mad Tsar, their faces pale with dread, knowing one wrong move could mean a noose or worse. For those of you huddled under your blankets with sleepy history tonight, brace yourselves for a death so ghastly, it'll make your skin crawl. A death that left Russia frozen in fear, and a mystery that still lingers in the frost. It was March 18, 1584, when Ivan's reign of terror came to its bloody end. Picture the scene: the Tsar, dressed in heavy furs despite the warmth of the Kremlin's firelit halls, sat hunched over a chessboard, his trembling hands moving a pawn as he played against a trusted noble, Bogdan Belsky. Ivan's bloodshot eyes darted around the room, his paranoia whispering that every shadow held a traitor. Then, mid-move, his body seized, his chest heaved, his mouth opened in a silent scream, and he collapsed onto the board, scattering the pieces like the lives he'd destroyed. A dark, putrid fluid oozed from his lips, staining the chessboard, the stench so vile it made the air unbreathable, a mix of rot and something sharper, something poisonous. His skin, already mottled with sores, swelled even more, his face bloating until it barely looked human, his eyes bulging like a fish left to rot in the sun. Courtiers stumbled back, gagging, as the Tsar's body twitched one last time before going still, his final breath a gurgling rasp that echoed like a death knell. The Kremlin erupted into chaos, but the real horror was just beginning. Ivan's body, left unattended for days in the frigid halls, began to decay at a terrifying pace. His skin split open, leaking a blackish ooze that pooled on the stone floor, the stench so overpowering that even the hardiest guards covered their faces with cloth soaked in vodka to stomach it when they finally moved him. The body, once a symbol of absolute power, was a grotesque mockery, his once regal furs now clinging to a rotting husk, his fingers blackened with decay, his face unrecognizable. They buried him in a hurry at the Archangel Cathedral, but the whispers couldn't be buried with him. Was this the natural end of a broken man, or something far more sinister? Historians still argue over what killed Ivan the Terrible, and the theories are as chilling as the man himself. Some say it was poison mercury or arsenic, slipped into his food or wine by a courtier, desperate to end his reign of terror. Suspicion fell on Boris Godunov, Ivan's cunning advisor, who'd rise to power after the Tsar's death. Godunov had every reason to want Ivan gone. A new Tsar meant a new chance to rule, and Ivan's madness was dragging Russia into chaos. Tests on Ivan's remains, centuries later, found high levels of mercury enough to kill a man twice over. But was it murder, or just the quack remedies Ivan took for his pain? Others point to disease, syphilis, perhaps, eating away at his body and mind, or a stroke brought on by years of stress and gluttony. Whatever the cause, Ivan's death was a gruesome spectacle, his body a testament to the rot that had long festered in his soul. It's a twisted kind of justice. Don't you think a Tsar who drowned his empire in blood, now drowning in the filth of his own decay, his legacy as putrid as his corpse? But Ivan's death wasn't just the end of a man, it was the end of an era. His empire, built on fear, teetered on the edge of collapse, his blood-soaked reign leaving scars that would bleed into Russia's future. The boyars he'd hunted now circled like vultures, and the whispers of poison grew louder, hinting at a betrayal so cold it could have been carved from the ice itself. Let's take a deep breath and step into the aftermath of Ivan's gruesome end, where the mystery deepens and Russia faces the consequences of a mad Tsar's wrath. As the stench of Ivan the Terrible's decay fades into the icy shadows of the Kremlin, let's step back from this blood-soaked tale and reflect on the legacy of a Tsar whose reign ended in such grotesque indignity. For those of you wrapped in your blankets tonight, joining us on Sleepy History, this story isn't just a horror show. It's a chilling reminder of what happens when power turns to madness and cruelty becomes a crown. Ivan IV, once a 6-foot-tall titan who dreamed of a mighty Russia, left behind an empire as broken as his rotting corpse, his name forever stained with the blood of the innocent. Ivan's death in 1584 didn't just end his reign, it plunged Russia into chaos. With his heir, Ivan Ivanovich, dead by his own hand, the throne passed to his feeble-minded son, Fyodor I, a man who weighed barely 130 pounds and lacked the spine to rule. The real power fell to Boris Godunov, Ivan's cunning advisor, the very man some whispered had slipped poison into the Tsar's wine. Under Fyodor, Russia stumbled into the time of troubles, a dark era of famine, rebellion, and foreign invasion that lasted until 1613. The boyars Ivan had hunted now rose like vultures, tearing at the empire he'd built, their greed cracking the foundation of his legacy. It's a bitter twist. Isn't it a Tsar who killed to keep control, only to leave his empire a feast for the very enemies he feared most? But Ivan's legacy isn't just chaos, it's terror. Etched into Russia's bones, his Oprichnina, that black-clad death squad, set a precedent for state-sanctioned violence that echoed through the centuries, from the Tsars to the Soviets and beyond. Historians estimate Ivan's reign claimed up to 100,000 lives: men, women, even kids slaughtered in massacres like Novgorod, their frozen bodies left to rot in the snow. He turned Russia into a land where fear ruled, where a single word could mean a noose, a blade, or an icy grave in the Volkhov River. And yet, some still call him a visionary, a unifier who laid the groundwork for Russia's rise. It's a sick kind of duality. Don't you think a madman who built an empire on a foundation of blood and bones? Ivan's story teaches us a brutal lesson: absolute power, when unchecked, rots the soul as surely as Ivan's body rotted in death. His paranoia, his cruelty, his thirst for blood, they didn't just destroy him, they poisoned everything he touched, leaving a scar on Russia that took decades to heal. As you drift off tonight, let that thought linger, not as a nightmare, but as a warning. Power, like a blade, cuts both ways, and even the mightiest can fall when madness takes the throne. Thank you for joining me in the Sleepy History tonight. If this tale of blood and terror has chilled your bones, dare to subscribe for more gruesome truths from history's darkest corners. Drop a comment. What horrified you most about Ivan's bloody end? Did the mystery of his death leave you reeling? Or was it the sheer scale of his cruelty? Hit that like button, tap the bell, and let's keep unearthing the past together. Sleep well, if you can, and may your dreams steer clear of the Tsar's blood-soaked halls. Good night.